much. Greetings, members of the Fourth Estate, fellow Zimbabweans, fellow Africans. Welcome to our weekly press briefing from the Citizens Coalition for Change. Zimbabwe is in a constitutional crisis, a crisis that is stemming out of a sham, fraudulent, discredited election of the August 23rd. The continuation of the sham election has been seen by the following signs: the continued victimization of members of the alternative, particularly in the countryside, violence, arbitrary arrests, abuse of our members of parliament, councillors and all public deployees and members of the citizens movement. The escalation of this gross violation of human rights is born out of the contested election of the 23rd. Just this week, we witnessed several cases of our members appearing on various concocted charges and flimsy charges. You know that our Honorable Member of Parliament, Honorable Sakandira, has been in prison, just been given bail, and 5 of our champions, and also our Honorable Member of the 9th Parliament, Honorable Job Scala, continues to be in prison. Today is 491 days in remand prison without trial. The clear arbitrary arrest and clear abuse of the criminal justice system in our country continues to be a weapon against alternative voices in our country. We have continued as CCC and as an alternative to reiterate our position without any equivocation that Zimbabwe must be able to come up with a solution to resolve this crisis, a solution that takes us back into a credible election, an election that is able to produce a credible and acceptable outcome by all Zimbabweans. We continue to reiterate without doubt and confusion that there is a clear roadmap that must be taken by Zimbabweans across the political divide to make sure that we dialogue and have a political settlement to resolve the crisis in our country. I want to speak about the issue that is before us today. You know that a few weeks ago, an imposter recalled members of parliament belonging to the Citizens Coalition for Change. And I want to emphasize and put it very clear that CCC has not recalled any member of parliament or councillor in respect of the just ended sham election in our country. Number 2, we want to also re-emphasize that our movement, the Citizens Coalition for Change, as led by Advocate Nelson Chamisa, has no such a designation and an office of an individual, an imposter by ZANU PF, who has been in the forefront of writing to the Speaker of Parliament, recalling our members of Parliament, and to the local government, recalling our councillor. Thirdly, we want to put it very clear that the Speaker of Parliament acted on error, acted on a letter that did not represent the CCC as was founded on the 24th of January 2022. Now, many people have asked us as a movement, why is this happening? Why is this tortoise on a lamppost been given all the powers to recall our members of parliament? The reason is very simple. Number 1, there is a deliberate attempt in this country to force a 2/3 majority by ZANU PF. ZANU PF wants to get a 2/3 majority by hook or crook. That's why you have seen them systematically deploying its proxy and an imposter to go and try and destabilize our members of parliament. Secondly, the intentions of ZANU PF are very clear, and their hand in all this is very clear. They try to make sure that ZANU PF wants to create an opposition that it leads itself. We have rejected as a movement, we have rejected as CCC the attempt to be co-opted into joining the gravy train because of trinkets and trappings of dictatorship. That's why Triple C is being punished for defeating Mr. Mnangagwa, for defeating ZANU PF in the watershed election. That's why you see the systematic attack on our movement. It is clear for all who care that ZANU PF wants to make sure that Triple C does not have access to the political finance funds that is entitled after winning more 104 seats in parliament in a flawed process, winning a presidential election in a flawed process, and more importantly, sweeping 33 out of 34 seats in local authorities in this country. ZANU PF has also advanced this crisis that they've created in their minds, sent to the Speaker of Parliament to ensure that the Triple C, as an alternative that emerged victorious in the election, is diverted, and Zimbabweans themselves are diverted from the key national question in this country. What is the national question? The question is very clear in this country, that the election on the 23rd was flawed, that ZANU PF, as its current composition, has no mandate from the people, because government is born out of an election, and an election that is free, fair, and credible. Lastly, ZANU PF has been doing all these shenanigans as an attempt to try and weaken, as an attempt to try and embarrass the alternative, because we used our freedom to protest by not attending the official opening of Parliament, which was addressed by Mr. Mnangagwa. Now, how do we exit this crisis? The big question is, what has Triple C done to ensure that we resolve the question facing our movement and our society? Firstly, we have made it very clear. We mandated, as the Citizen National Assembly, we made a resolution in our 18th Citizens National Assembly. We mandated President Chamisa to write to the Speaker of Parliament and inform the Speaker, Honorable Mudenda, that we have acted in error, that the current person who wrote to you does not represent our movement. And the Speaker has given us a response that the issue has been subjected to the courts, and we await the court processes that are happening. Number two, we have, as a movement, opened a criminal case against the imposter of ZANU PF, because we cannot watch when there's criminal abuse of our intellectual property, the criminal abuse of our logo, which ironically the symbol of our movement, which is the face of our president. But an imposter uses that letterhead to try and abuse our party, to try and abuse our property. That's why we've engaged the state, particularly the police. And we continue to urge the Zimbabwe Republic Police to take the necessary measures to make sure that such criminals, such criminal conduct is brought to book. You know, fellow Zimbabweans, that if it was the case of the opposite side, if any case had been opened against our member, you would see the energy, the extent, the harassment, the surveillance that would have happened if it was a member of the authentic alternative in this country, the Triple C. What does that indicate? It shows beyond doubt to all who care to listen that in this country we have a law for ZANU PF and the law for the rest of us. That's why we made sure that we engage the police for this act to be resolved. Because we are a law-abiding organization, we don't intend to take the law into our hands to deal with the current criminality and gross abuse of our intellectual properties. Thirdly, we have made sure that as a movement, we protest by disengaging from all sittings of parliament, from all sittings of council, as a way to record our displeasure, to ensure that our members of parliament and councillors are reinstated into their respective offices. Because these people were voted for by the people. These people are representing Zimbabweans as they were voted in the election. Let me take this opportunity to put the general notice to all Zimbabweans, to all members of the media, to all change champions, to all state institutions, to all members of the region and the international community, that any correspondence that you receive coming from an imposter called Chabangu does not reflect the position of Triple C, and any correspondence that might be sent either to government, that might be sent either to the media, either to our citizens calling for any action or any program on behalf of CCC does not reflect and represent CCC. So we are putting citizens on this general notice and all the stakeholders of our movement. Now, I've spoken clearly about the issue of the recalls and the interventions that we have done. We have seen that citizens continue in respect of the second issue that I want to speak about, the SADC report. We have seen that SADC has produced its final report, and we are happy because the report of this SADC confirms what has been confirmed by Zimbabweans. After the election, we mandated our champion-in-chief, the president, to have a consultative forum across the country. And the universal consensus by all change champions and citizens across the country is that the election of the 23rd was flawed. It's not just a CCC issue, it's a collective position by citizens. Citizens have affirmed how this election was grossly mismanaged by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission, how the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission failed its constitutional duty to conduct a free, fair and credible election. That is what the SADC has confirmed, the extent of voter suppression that happened, the partisan conduct of the Zimbabwe Broadcasting Services, the issue of violence in the countryside and in the urban areas, the issue of the ballot, the issue of the voters' roll, has all been confirmed by SADC to confirm that this election has been flawed. And we have proposed very clear as CCC that the solution to make sure that we resolve the crisis in our country, which is the third issue that I'm going to speak about, which is the issue of dialogue. Many people have asked us this key question: how do we exit from the crisis that we're facing as a people? How do we rescue Zimbabwe from the vicious cycles of disputed elections? Since 1980, this country has been poisoned by vicious cycles of disputed election. Since 1980, that election was challenged in court. The election that followed after was challenged in court. The election that preceded after was challenged in court up to this very day. And how do we cure permanently the crisis of stolen election and discrete election in this country? We have made it very clear, and we make and reiterate this important national call, that Zimbabwe must dialogue to resolve the crisis in our country. Now, many people will try and attempt to say you are choosing the path of dialogue, because we are very clear. We don't intend to govern this country over dead bodies. We don't intend to govern this country on account of lives lost because of politics. We are very clear that everything must be resolved. The major political entities in this country must be able to sit down. The major players in this country, the civic society, the church, students' unions, vendors, the black middle class, business people, must be able to sit down and say what is the solution. Not a government of national unity, not sharing of positions, but to dialogue on the way forward to rescue Zimbabwe from this dark cloud of vicious cycles of disputed election. So we must be able to dialogue on the basis of how do we make sure that we correct the problems of how we hold elections in our country. It is in that respect that CCC mandated our champion-in-chief, Advocate Nelson Chamisa, with the mandate to pursue this route to ensure that Zimbabweans are able to dialogue and resolve the crisis that is facing our country. Lastly, CCC wants to confirm to all Zimbabweans that we continue with our political program. I'm sure you have seen that we have been to different parts of the country to make sure that we continue to organize, because Zimbabweans have a right, have a constitutional right to ensure that they express themselves to resolve the crisis of the stolen election, because that is the elephant in the room. The current administration, the current government in its composition has no mandate from the people, and Zimbabweans across continue to organize, and we are going to be, because it's not a partisan issue, it's not a CCC issue. Zimbabweans have the Section 59 of the Zimbabwean Constitution giving Zimbabweans the right to peacefully express themselves against the displeasure of what transpired on the 23rd of August 2023. Thank you very much. I'll take questions if there are any. Yes, Mr. Pindai.
Yeah, we've seen several posts on social media talking about demonstrations. Are there plans of demonstration by the opposition?
Look, I've said it very clear that Zimbabweans, the issue of the stolen election is not a Triple C issue. The issue of the stolen election is a Zimbabwean issue. Because after the election, the people that suffer, look at what is happening to people who are making a living on informal sector vending. They are being attacked. Look at the number of people that are migrating as economic and political refugees out of the country. Look at the state of the economy in our country. Tulingube continues to rampage the economy and make sure that they borrow not just on our behalf, but on behalf of the future. The ballooning debt crisis in this country, the macroeconomic instability in this country. All these are ills, all these are symptoms, all these are signs of a stolen election. And Zimbabweans across walks of life have got that right to peacefully express themselves as codified by Section 59 of the Zimbabwean Constitution.
Okay, I wanted to first quote what you said. You mentioned about members of parliament and the council disengaging from their sittings. Then to my brother right here, you mentioned that the citizens are suffering. Okay, my question comes here where I can say, how is the disengaging helping the citizens? Because basically we are looking at the disengaging from the CC MPs and councillors, helping the party, benefiting the party. How is this helping, benefiting the citizens who are suffering, like what you mentioned when you answered my brother?
No, thank you very much. That's actually a very important question on the aspect of our disengagement. And I want it to be known that we have made sure that our members disengage from the sittings of parliament and local authorities. But they continue to make sure that they discharge their community duties, to discharge their responsibilities, the political responsibility bestowed upon them. That's why you saw just over the weekend our organizing Peru champion, Amos Chibaya, the Honorable, in Mkoba, engaging citizens, continuing with the political and community programs. We have seen our councillors continuing with the political program in communities. But what we have done as a decision of the party is to make sure that we disengage from all the sittings in local authorities, from all the cities in parliament as a way for the next 14 days, after which we are obviously going to sit down and give a position in terms of how to move forward in respect of the end of the 14 days, after which we made our position that for the next 14 days we are disengaging from parliament and from council. Thank you.
So a couple of days ago, Professor Amon Murira held a press conference where he claimed that you as a party engaging in demonstrations will cause instability and there are no political prisoners in Zimbabwe. What's your take on that?
Look, I don't know that the professor given reference to understand the definition of a political prisoner. What other definition defines the 491 days of Honorable Scala, a member of parliament who questioned power, having those rights given to him by the constitution of this country, he himself belonging to the second arm of the state, which is the legislature, gets punished for differing politically with ZANU PF. What did you call such a prisoner? Does he not have, like all the other citizens, the right to a free trial? Does he not have, like all the other citizens, the right to bail? Honorable Sagandila, a recently elected member of parliament, is a political prisoner because he's been convicted on concocted charges reported for by members of ZANU PF. Look at what's happening to the recent imposter who has been doing recalls. We have reported the matter to the police. He's enjoying protection of the state, the abuse of the state, and ZANU PF cannot come clean on this question of how they've managed to weaponize institutions of the state to empower a proxy whose intention and objective is to undermine our democratic right to form our own organization and belong to our own organization. They did an undertaker on the yesteryear movement. They gave it to their own imposter. We exercise our freedom to de-associate completely and from the new political organization went into a followed election under extreme difficult conditions. What happened after is assault. What happens after is automatic attack on the authentic opposition, because ZANU PF wants an opposition that they can lead themselves. We have rejected that. We are not going to accept. It doesn't matter the trinkets and trappings presented upon our leadership collective. We have said it as Triple C that let us dialogue on principles so that we rescue our country, not the conversation about discussing about benefits and so forth. So it's very clear that there are political prisoners in this country, and that's why we have made it very clear that SADC must be able to help us so that we resolve the crisis. And of course, the question on instability. We wrote just before the election that the region, the international community, cannot choose stability over democracy, because that decision itself will create instability. And this country is sliding towards a de facto one-party state. What happens in a de facto one-party state is instability. The continued attack on the authentic opposition in this country naturally leads us to a question where we undermine democracy for stability, but in the same process breed fertile grounds for instability in our country. So the ball is in their court, the ball is in their responsibility to make sure that we choose democracy over stability so that permanently we create stability in our country. Yes, Rutel.
I realize that you're not speaking about dialogue and the right to for Zimbabweans to express themselves. Have you abandoned your call for fresh elections scaffolded by SADC?
We made it very clear, and when I started my statement, I spoke very clear that the solution, the permanent solution in this country is making sure that we railroad Zimbabwe into a process, a fresh election that gives mandate to the government. That election must be scaffolded by SADC. Why are we talking about the role of SADC in the Zimbabwean election? It's because the Zimbabwean Electoral Commission failed its constitutional responsibility. You are aware that the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission up to this day cannot justify, cannot quantify the announcement that they made declaring Mr. Mnangagwa as the president of this country. So we are very clear that the solution, the permanent solution to this country is the holding of a fresh election. We have not bowed on that demand. We have not bowed on that unique and clear position that is the only solution to rescue Zimbabwe. But dialogue is an important measure to take us there, because we have to dialogue on the key steps that we must take. What are the issues raised by the Citizens Coalition for Change? ZANU PF, in actual fact, disputes the election of the 23rd. Are you aware of that, Ruvim? That ZANU PF has went to court to challenge the election, that the election that happened in Seke, that the election that happened in Zimba was not credible. ZANU PF has affirmed by its litigation, by its challenge of the election, that this election was flawed, that this election did not meet the domestic, constitutional, and regional and international standards.
Now, you also added that it enjoys state security. Either it enjoys security, filed a complaint, criminal charges against the arrested. Now, given the reality that the matter is now before the court, the courts that you in previous occasions mentioned that are captured in the matter which is before court, Chabang wins the court case on the recalls. What's the next step for Triple C? Should Chabang prevail in the courts?
Look, we don't have to put the cart before the horse. We have spelled out our political program of action, and that program of action included our disengagement from Parliament, writing to the Speaker of Parliament, and of course members of Parliament taking their own legal route to make sure that that issue is resolved. Once that 14 days lapses, we are going to address the nation at the appropriate time in terms of the next way forward and interventions, politically, legally, socially, and so forth. So on the same respect, on all the issues that have been taken by different members in their individual capacities, is going to be confirmed by the said applicants and litigants on the cases. But we have made it very clear as a party that once any issue has been announced, and we are going to communicate at the appropriate time in terms of our interventions. For now, we continue with our disengagement, and let me take this opportunity again, my brother, to thank citizens for hitting the call of disengagement, and of course to thank our deployees, all of them in local authorities, to thank our members of parliament for hitting the call from the leadership, from the Citizen National Assembly, that we are disengaging from activities in parliament and disengaging from all local authorities, because there was interest from naysayers and doomsayers that change champions and deployees are going to hit the call, that people are going to change the names of their fathers and the sending party. But citizens, change champions in parliament and in council were very clear that we have made a decision as a movement, as the sending party, as led by Advocate Nelson Chamisa, that we don't recognize the imposter, that our party, Triple C, is led by Advocate Nelson Chamisa, and our party is very clear in terms of the task and the responsibilities that we are taking going forward. I think we'll take the last two, and then Tony, yes. We have made a resolution as a party. The Citizen National Assembly mandated our champion-in-chief, Advocate Nelson Chamisa. He was given in our 18th Citizen National Assembly the mandate to pursue the avenue of dialogue. You know that dialogue has its own modalities and its own processes. That's why we've officially, as a movement, given President Nelson Chamisa and the team that is tasked to make sure that we are able to dialogue, not just with Mr. Mnangagwa, but as a country, to make sure that we bring on board members of the civic society, we bring on board members of the church, we bring on board students, we bring on board workers, we bring on board members of the media, because the solution of dialogue is not a partisan issue, it's a permanent solution to the crisis in this country. Yes, Tony.
First one is the issue where we need to have clarity, specifically from your supporters, as far as the disengagement process is concerned. At what extent are you disengaging? Because it then seems that there are certain processes and procedures that the members of parliament are disengaging. You've got some that you also allow them to then engage, as well as the same process is concerned. That's the first one. Then the issue of engaging in dialogue with the ZANU PF government. What is the expected outcome that you're going to be happy with? Should you then engage in an outcome that you're happy with? What is this expectation that you'll be much more happy after the engagement? Should you be successful? More and less of what is your actual demand from this engagement that you want to have? Last but not least, they've already said that they will not have a fresh election. They've distanced themselves that there's a constitutional crisis, neither does Zimbabwe need another re-election. That is the position from ZANU PF, and you also have another contrast demand as far as it's concerned. These people also exercising your as far as the constitution is concerned, your right to freedom of expression and all that. Is there a certain time frame towards this? And ZANU PF position has been clear that they do not recognize the constitutional crisis in Zimbabwe. How are you dealing with that position as far as your negotiations are concerned?
Thank you very much. Yes, we know.
As a follow-up to questions on dialogue, so that you can answer it. There were reports in the Herald where the presidential spokesperson, Mr. George Charamba, alleged that you have effortlessly tried to reach out to the president. At first it said that you have sent Bobo Chingono, you have sent Bishop Mutendi, and your leader Nelson Chamisa has actually also reached out personally, and there is a plea that was wishing that Mungondiba or something. So I want you to respond to those allegations by Ms. Charamba that you have been trying, that you have even tried reaching out through the Vice President Chiwenga. Are those allegations true?
Thank you very much. Let me start by a question, Tonio, on the issue of disengagement. We have made it very clear. We are not going to be attending any sittings of Parliament. What are the sittings of Parliament? One, Parliament sessions sit as per what is going to be publicized very soon. We are not going to be attending that Parliament session because it's within the 14 days. Number two, there are Parliament committees that sit here in the country. We don't attend such. In fact, very soon, just yesterday, there were committees that were sitting, and all our members did not attend all those committee meetings that were happening yesterday. We are chairing some of the committees as the alternative, but we made it very clear that we're on disengagement, and therefore we're not going to be attending all those committee meetings. So those are parliamentary sittings. Council, again, has its own committee sittings, which do the management role of different organs of council, and of course the full council of all the cities in the country. We are not going to see all of them, because all these are sittings that discuss policies and pass resolutions on policies pertaining council, and those are not going to be sitting for the next 14 days. So we have pronounced ourselves very clear, and I hope you understand what it means in terms of disengagement. And you can see the reaction by ZANU PF to try and make sure that they come after our members of parliament. They try and make sure, because we have made a very strong political statement by disengagement. Secondly, on the question of dialogue, ZANU PF as a protagonist can say their views, what they think. We have defined the crisis in this country. Number one, and we're not doing any climb down on our position, that the election on the 23rd was flawed, that Mr. Mnangagwa has no mandate from the people, and that the solution to resolve all this is a fresh and a credible election. So they can say what they want to say. We have pronounced ourselves very clear. And this position is not just a Triple C position, but it's a position that has been confirmed by citizens, that we want a fresh election in this country, that the election on the 23rd was flawed and it did not reflect the will of the people. And more importantly, that this election did not meet domestic, constitutional, regional and international standards of a fair and credible election. So they can say what they want, they can shout on top of the mountain. SADC has produced its final report. The African Union confirmed itself. The EU Observer Mission confirmed itself that the election was flawed. What does it mean when the election is flawed? It means the outcome is not credible. So it's not a Triple C position. It is a collective Zimbabwean position. And Zimbabweans went to vote. Are you aware that more than almost 1 million citizens here in Harare were denied of their right to vote? More than 300,000 Zimbabweans staying here in Harare were not given an opportunity to vote because of the deliberate suppression. Are you aware of what happened in Manicaland? So all this is not a Triple C position. It is what happened. And ZANU PF must respond to the question of holding election in an unfair and unfair condition. That is the big question in this country. So they can say what they want, but the position is known. It is public. It is clear as a court spec. And then on the question of our demands, I think I've answered that. We are very clear that we must dialogue as a way to take Zimbabwe back to legitimacy. The expected outcome of the election is to make sure that if SADC comes in, we're able to scaffold the process to take us back to legitimacy. The nitty-gritties of the roadmap might differ, but the road must be taking Zimbabwe away from the legitimacy question. How do we go back to a legitimacy issue? Is making sure that we hold a credible election, so that the outcome of that election, it doesn't matter who the winner is. The loser is able to congratulate the winner, and we're able to build our country. I hope that's the last question.
Okay, sorry to take it back. I'm quoting my two brothers. We were mentioning about dialogue. So I want to understand clearly, is this dialogue opting for a GNU, or is this dialogue opting for a re-election? Given that the government mentioned about not having re-elections, someone commented while we were having our Twitter space today, the country currently doesn't have funds for a re-election. So I want to understand, when you say you want to do a dialogue, is it we are sitting for a GNU, or we are sitting so that you can have a re-election?
I think we... Okay. It's okay.
So, Honorable, how do you continue to demand for a dialogue that ZANU PF has already said you can only do that through online?
Look, let me answer my brother very clear, so that you understand. We are not interested, unequivocal. The Citizens Coalition for Change, as led by President Advocate Nelson Chamisa, is not interested in any forming of a government of national unity. We have said, let us dialogue on the question that is affecting Zimbabwean, a question of a stolen election, a question of an illegitimate government that is born out of a flawed process, so that we are able to take Zimbabwe back to legitimacy. And that legitimacy can only be given in a free, fair, and a fresh election. That is our position. Pollard, my sister Ruvimbo, I will sound like a broken record because we have said it repeatedly that we are not interested in theatrics, we are not interested in drama that is represented by Pollard. Pollard is a choir of people who want to sing the song of ZANU PF. We are not interested in that. We have said let us dialogue. We dialogue on the crisis in this country and we agree on the method to rescue Zimbabwe from the crisis. ZANU PF as a protagonist can say its position, and I can tell you without doubt that they will have a clamp down because we have made our emphatic position very clear in terms of what must happen. Short of that, Zimbabwe will continue into this dark cloud of uncertainty and unpredictability. Members of the 40th state, fellow Zimbabweans, thank you very much.